Hi everyone, my name is Tammy and I'm an advocate for children with special needs and I'm a parent coach. I help parents navigate the special education process, and welcome to the SPED Answers Way. So I'm going to show you guys where the federal regulations are, and the reason why this is important is because a lot of the jargon that you guys need is in the regulations. Okay, for instance, here are the regulations, and I'll put the link to this video on the bottom of the screen, on the bottom in the description, so you guys can have it. Okay, so this is the reason why this is important. First of all, you need to understand why we even have special education, and a lot of us already know, but there is a purpose, and it's a cited purpose, and it's under IDEA. And the purpose is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free and appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs. And if you read this, you'll notice that there's nothing in here about the unique needs of the school district. Absolutely not. Or the state, for that matter. It's all about you and your kid. Okay? Mostly it's about your kid. It is also to ensure that the rights of children with disabilities and their, wait for it, parents are protected. Who are they protected from? The state. Who are they protected from? The school district. Okay? They're the ones that are the designated authority to provide your kid with an education. These federal regulations were specifically designed to protect your child with a disability from the very agency that has the authority to educate your child. Yes. Congress had to invent regulations to protect kids with disabilities because the school districts were refusing back in the day to educate children with disabilities. So, Congress came up with IDEA to protect them from the very entity that's supposed to educate them. Can you believe this? Can you believe what the words coming out of my mouth? This is crazy. And they had to give them money to do it because, they won't do it on their own, God forbid. Okay? So anyway, costs too much money. It's not true. None of it's true. Special education is a money pit, okay? The reason why it's a money pit is because there's really no results unless you fight for them. That's why it's called a money pit, okay? So the people that are supposed to be educating your kids, it's not a money pit for them. They're getting paid hand over fist, okay? The school teachers, the special ed teachers, the special ed directors, all of the administration that has to do with special education within your school district, within the state, within the federal government, they're all getting paid. Your kid's not getting an education, but everybody's getting paid. Lawyers are getting paid. Providers who can deliver specific services that don't deliver the services, yeah, they don't. There's lots of them. I actually had 2 cases where 2 children that I was representing at the same time were denied 300 hours of BCBA in one solid year each. 600 hours of BCA services. Yeah. It was the kids won in the end, but in reality, even when they win, they lose. Okay? So anyway. So this is the purpose. And it says that IDEA is to assist states, localities, educational service agencies, and federal agency to provide for the education of children with disabilities. Now that piece right there is all about the money. Cha-ching. That's what the assistance is. And to give them training too, but mostly it's the cha-ching. Okay? To assist and ensure the effectiveness of efforts to educate children with disabilities. And it says to assist and ensure. Yeah, that's the monitoring part. That's OSEP. Okay, because the states don't monitor anything. They're always in trouble. And the reason why the states are in trouble with the feds is because their school districts are in violation. Okay? That's what it's all about. So this is where you get this information from. Okay? So when you ask a school district to provide your kid with FAPE, this is what you're talking about right here, the purpose of IDEA. This is it all up in here. Okay? So you can actually go to this website and do like I do. Cut and paste. Drop this right into an email. Start your paper trail early. Start it early and come at them hard. Okay? Cite the regulations. Pursuant to 300.1, the purpose of IDEA is to yada, yada, yada. You're not doing that, school district. I'm going to need you to do that. Okay? So, that's one of the things. So you want to start there. Okay? So now we're going to go back. And this is what I wanted to show you guys. All right. See, here's the definitions of all of this stuff right here. Okay, look at assistive technology, the devices. Okay, what the act means. Okay, and then this is 20 USC 1400. Okay, that's a very important. That's the statute. Okay, you have statutes and you have regulations. That's the statute, section 1400. Okay, 20 USC 1400 et al. That's all of it. Okay. So here, you break down everything right here. See, assistive tech. You guys are always asking me questions about assistive technology. The services, what do they mean? The evaluation, the evaluation of the needs of a child with a disability, including functional evaluation of the child and the child's customary environment. That's an FBA. Okay. Purchasing and leasing, otherwise, okay, that's an FM system. That's a computer. Okay, this is what they're saying. Your kid, if the team determines assistive technology, this is what assistive technology means. All of this stuff right here. You guys want to know? Here are your answers. Okay, so when the school district comes at you and they say, well, we can't do this, or I don't understand what you're talking about assistive technology, you tell them, oh, okay, no problem. 300.6. Go look it up, you tell them. Just cite the regulation, because there it is right there. Talk about training or technical assistance for a child with a disability, or if appropriate, that child's family. So if your kid's getting ABA at school and your kid needs it at home, they have to train the parents how to implement the behavior support plan at home. Okay, because kids don't learn kids with autism, for instance, they can't generalize across all settings like a typical kid can. So if you tell a kid, don't speak to strangers in the supermarket, that kid will take that phrase, don't speak to strangers, across all areas. You don't have to break it down. Don't speak to strangers in the grocery store, in the park, in the street. You don't have to do any of that. You do with the child with autism. And you have to have a behavior support plan to do that, because the behavior support plan will break it down in chunks like that. All right? So then the family needs to know how to do this, because most families aren't behaviorists. They're not board certified behavior analysts. Okay, so they need to be trained. Okay, there's actually a whole piece in the idea that talks about training for parent training. So, and here's one of them right here: training or technical assistance for professionals. That's the other thing they do. So when the school says we don't have that, or our people aren't trained to do that, you can tell them, well, then that's a violation. Okay. If the school says they can't do some of this stuff in here, that's a violation. That's what they're paid to do. Okay. They agreed to implement all of this, not parts of it, not selectively, not misinterpreting it and doing it their way, not saying, well, we do it like this here in this school district. No, federally speaking, you have to all do it like this. Nobody cares about your little nuances in your little school districts. This is how you're supposed to do it. Not your way, not the SPED director's way, not the state special ed director's way, unless all of the ways are under IDEA. They're in alignment with the IDEA regulations. Then that's okay to say. See what I'm talking about? See, here's a definition of a charter school. Here's a definition of a child with a disability. Look how big it is. Oh, looky there, autism. Here it is. And then we have children with, here's a child with emotional disturbance, okay? And that includes kids with bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, any of the emotional disorders, especially when it comes down from a clinical psychologist that says your child's diagnosed with yada, 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 and your child's actually taking medication for it. Okay, so this is why this is important. Now, here's a cool thing I want you guys to know. Do you know you can't have autism if you have autism, right here in the regulations, it differentiates autism. It differentiates between autism and emotional disturbance. In fact, it actually says, autism does not apply if a child's educational performance is adversely affected primarily because the child has an emotional disturbance as defined in C4 of this section. So emotional disturbance is defined as this, okay? And the reason why it's written like that is because some behaviors of kids who have autism look a lot like emotional disturbance like bipolar, or they have a behavior disorder. A behavior disorder and so an emotional disturbance is not the same. Okay, it can look the same, but if you have a child with autism, then it's highly, I can't say it's highly unlikely, because there are children with autism who are very high functioning and maybe they do have this disability, but it just says that if the child is exhibiting emotional disturbance, it means a condition in exhibiting one or more of the following characteristics over a period of time: an inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or other health factors; an inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationship with peers or teachers. See, some of this stuff, this right here especially, this looks like autism, okay? But it's social emotional too. Inappropriate types of behaviors or feelings under normal circumstances. Okay, this right here is not autism. Okay, inappropriate behaviors or feelings, that's how can I say it? Okay, inappropriate behaviors for autism sometimes looks like the hand flapping. Okay, that's inappropriate behaviors. Feelings could be a fear. Okay, that has to do with, an overload of, overexcited because there's too much going on. They can't take it all in at the same time. That can also be a behavior disorder, or a psychological disorder too. Okay, sensitivity to noise. A general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. Children with autism don't usually exhibit this. However, there are some times where they're very high functioning and they will. But the difference between the two really is a doctor. Okay, schools are not doctors. And they don't get to throw away your child's diagnosis to suit their needs. That's what I'm trying to get at. For all intents and purposes, what I'm trying to tell you guys is this. For emotional disturbance, if the school comes back and tells you your kid has any of these things right here, you skip your happy butt down to the nearest clinical psychologist that does not work for the school district and get a diagnosis for your kid and find out exactly what emotional disturbance is. Let me tell you about emotional disturbance, okay? The emotional disturbance is in the DSM-5, okay? What they don't do here is tell you what emotional disturbance is. Okay, they don't tell you that it's bipolar. They don't tell you it's schizophrenia. They don't tell you it's an anxiety disorder. They don't tell you any of that. But if you look at the DSM-5, it's humongous. Okay, the DSM-5 has pages and pages and pages and pages of all of this stuff. Okay, so when the school district comes back and says your kid has emotional disturbance, you take those silly little things that they have, those evaluations, and you go bring it to a clinical psychologist, and you have them run some tests on your kid to find out if what they said about your kid is true. And not for nothing, in order for even a clinical psychologist to come up with that, they actually have to meet with your kid several times. Don't just walk in there and say, do a test and tell me what my kid has. Okay? Because these types of emotional disturbances take some time to figure out. It's not like the chicken pox. It's not like a broken leg. So you really need to take your kid to a doctor, get them the counseling that they need, and then tell the doctor that you need to know what emotional disturbance your kid has. That's what you tell the doctor. I need to know exactly what emotional disturbance my kid has. School said my kid suffers from emotional disturbance. I don't know what that means. Is it, depression? Is the child manic? Is the child bipolar? Is it anxiety disorders? Is it a mood disorder? And if so, which one? Those are the kind of questions you need to ask. And the same thing goes for autism. 9 times out of 10, you're never, ever, ever, ever going to have a school district talk about autism. The reason why you're not is because autism, when a school district, you walk in with a diagnosis with autism, and the first thing the school district sees is dollar signs. How much money your kid's going to cost them. Because a lot of kids on the spectrum need everything. OT, PT, speech and language. They need a behavior support plan. So that means they need a BCBA. And you can't just get any old buddy. You need somebody who's trained, who knows what they're doing. And the worse or more complex, I should say, that the child is, the most definitely your kid needs a BCBA, a trained BCBA, okay, with major things behind them. All right. So these are just some of the things that, like multiple disabilities. Okay. All of these things are in the regulations. Okay. When you want to, I talk a lot about what to say in emails. And then I pop off with a lot of regulations. You guys don't know what these regulations are. Sometimes I pop off with a lot of special education jargon too. This is where I got it, right here. See, free and appropriate public education. Let's look at that. Let's see what that is, because that's one that's everywhere. Free and appropriate public education. It's 300.17. Okay? It means special education and related services that are provided at public expense, under public supervision, and direction, and without charge. Free. That's the free part. Meet the standards of the SEA, the State Educational Agency. So whatever your educational standards are, that whatever your kid receives for special education, it has to meet those same standards, including the requirements of this part, okay, which means including the IDEA regulations. Include an appropriate preschool, okay, so that's that pre-K school, so from 3 to 5. Okay, if your kid has been diagnosed with autism, and your kid is between the ages of 3 and 5, you need to pick up the phone and call the school. It's called Child Find. If your kid was in early intervention should have contacted the school because your kid was on what's called an IFSP. If your kid was on that, then that early intervention people have to contact the school district, and the school district has to have a meeting with you to write up an IEP for your kid and to maybe do some more evaluations. But what I would do is, between the early intervention people and the public school, they need to get that done. And they're supposed to get it done before your kid turns 3. So usually if your kid's in early intervention, your kid's been there a minute. And early intervention goes from 0 to 2. So I think it's 0 to 3. So like at 2 years, 9 months, if your kid's in early intervention, you need to start that ball rolling. And if they say something stupid, like we don't do that here, you call OSAP. You say, oh, okay, no problem. I'll just call the Office of Special Education Programs in Washington, D.C. and tell them that you said, early intervention said they don't do early intervention and transition the kid to IEPs. They don't do any of that. I'll make sure I tell them that. What's your name? That's the kind of stuff you do. But this is where I get it from. Now there's another, I don't know why that one has 2, but why there's 2 of these. But these are these the definitions? Yes, these are the definitions. That's why it says it there too. Because it goes back in. These are all the definitions of all the words you hear me say. Okay, when we talk about equipment. So when you want to know when you're talking about your kid needs some kind of equipment. So let's say we go in there and we'll see equipment. What does equipment mean? Okay, under the idea. Machinery, utilities, and built-in equipment, and any necessary enclosures or structures to house the machinery, utilities, or equipment, and all other items necessary for the functioning of a particular facility as a facility for the provision of educational services. That's a building. They're talking about a building, including items such as instructional equipment. Okay, so they're talking about a building that houses everything. Okay, and a building where you provide the services. Okay, so as instructional equipment and necessary furniture, printed, published, and audio, visual instruction, this is what equipment means. Okay, so when you guys say my kid needs a particular device, that falls under equipment. When the school districts say we don't do that here, your response is, so you're not in alignment with the federal regs? Because the federal regs says this is called equipment. I'm saying my kid needs equipment. My kid needs a computer. My kid needs paper that has raised lines on it so he can feel it because he has OT issues. So he can feel where the line is. My kid needs, okay? My kid needs a ramp to get in and out of the school building. My kid needs a computer. My kid needs computer programs, okay? This is where you get this from right here. All right, this is why this stuff is important to you guys. And you're not going to remember all of this. That's why I want you guys to see this. Okay, I want you to see where this stuff is. When they talk about native language, what exactly are they talking about? Native language. Okay, native language is the language when used with respect to an individual whose limited English proficient, means the following. The language normally used by that individual, that's your native language. If English is used all the time, then your native language is English. Okay. If it's Spanish, then it's Spanish. Okay. You could have both Spanish and you could be bilingual, but the language normally used by that individual, or in the case of a child, the language normally used by the parents of the child, except in this section C, whatever it is. Okay. So when you're at home, what's the language you speak at home? Because your kid's going to school and your kid's learning English. But when you're at home with your kid, what are you speaking at home? Now, the reason why this is important is because if you are bilingual, but your native language is Spanish or another language, you're going to need to have like interpreters at your team meetings, because sometimes stuff gets lost in translation. Okay. And what you might think in your native language as a word meaning something, it could be the complete opposite in English. Okay. Our language, the English language, is very complicated. So that's why we have interpreters. You have a right to an interpreter at a team meeting if your native language is something other than English. You have a right to have the paperwork interpreted or translated into your language in order for you to fully participate in the team meeting process, in the decision-making process. And schools like to take advantage of people who don't speak English as their native language. Don't you know that? Of course they do. They're no good. Okay? So, this is where you find everything you need to know. And I mean everything. Okay? You want to know about the evaluation process. Okay? So when, for instance, I went way out. So for instance, when you're talking to OSAP, okay? When you're talking to OSAP, that's these words and under the idea is what you want to use when you're talking to them. So when you're asking them a question, you say, I just need to know, what is the definition of a child? What is the definition of child find? You know, you need to ask them questions that are directly related to the idea. Because not for nothing, I think sometimes they like to play games. Okay. Well, I had one what's her name? Rebecca told me that parents, when they call, they ask rhetorical questions. It's not really a question. It's more like a statement. And so, you know, OSAP can't, you know, they can't respond to that, and I don't blame them. It's you know, it's not a question. If you're asking a question like, what is child finding, or the school didn't provide me with prior written notice, okay? You have to know what these are so you can know what to tell OSAP when you're talking to them. You have to ask them a question. You have to say, so the school district had a team meeting and they didn't invite me. Or the school district had a team meeting and they never told me who was coming to the meeting in the prior written notice. And then when I get there, half the people weren't even there. So was that a violation? And they'll say yes. They'll put it in writing. And what they'll do is they'll send you something to tell you where you can find that information. 9 times out of 10, it's the regulation. It's a link to the regulation. Or it'll be an OSAP letter, which we'll have another training on regarding OSAP and where you can find their stuff. Okay? It's really cool because it helps you. So all of this stuff right here. So remember I said, see, here's FAPE, methods and payment. Here's free and appropriate public education again. Okay? The eligibility. This is real important. Eligibility for assistance. This is directly to the state special ed director. A state is eligible for assistance under Part B of the Act for a fiscal year if the state submits a plan that provides assurances to the Secretary of State, has in effect policies and procedures to ensure that the state meets the conditions of Section 300 through 176. Okay? Now, 300 through 176 is in here. Okay, it's all in here. So they start from, way down here. So this is what the state has to do. The state has to start here in subpart D. They have to comply with, they have to provide assurances that they're going to do all 300.176. I'm sorry. I went the wrong way. Okay, right here. whoops. 100 through 176. Okay? So that's how they get assistance. They have to make sure that they do this. It's 101 through 176. Okay? But they're obligated to, those assurances is for everything. It's not just 300 through 176. But that they meet the conditions. So they have to provide assurances to the Secretary of that state. They have to provide the assurances that they meet the criteria and under those regulations. Okay? But they're the school districts and the state are obligated for everything under IDEA. Okay? Let me go back. One. Okay. Oh, I see what they're doing. So under the eligibility, so they must provide FAPE. They must provide, there's a limitation to FAPE for certain ages. There's other FAPE. Here's all the other FAPE requirements. Okay. So when you say FAPE, you get FAPE in residential placements. You get FAPE for assistive technology. So when you guys file a complaint, let's say you're filing a complaint. If you file a complaint against the school district and you say it's a denial of FAPE, you can cite all of this right here. That's a denial of FAPE. If they didn't do one of these things in here, that's a denial of FAPE. If they didn't provide you with assistive technology, if they didn't provide you with extended school year services and your child needed it, that's a denial of FAPE. Okay, so you can say other FAPE, that's what it's under, other FAPE requirements. So extended school year, that's a biggie for all of you guys, and it'll be coming up real hard soon. So here's what extended school services is. So school districts lie all the time about what ESY is. Here's ESY. Okay, extended school year services must be provided only if a child's IEP determines on an individual basis. Okay, so a lot of school districts have these blanket requirements or blanket programs. So if your child is, they're going to give your kid ESY. They're only going to give your kid ESY for 2 weeks. Okay, and you only go half a day in 2 weeks. Okay, so there are some kids that they need their entire IEP implemented because they're globally delayed. They have to provide that, all of that. If they don't, then the child is going to regress in a multitude of areas. Okay, you can't just give ESY services just for the sake of giving them. You can't have aides providing special education services in the summer. If your kid has special needs and they're providing an ESY program, then there has to be legit teachers in the room. Okay, there has to be legit sped teachers, not aides. An aide is an aide. An aide can leave there and go work at Burger King, no problem. And who's to say they didn't just come from there? You don't know. And that's not saying anything bad about Burger King. But an aide is not a teacher. And if they want us to have respect for them, then they have to make sure that the people that they have working with our children are actually licensed and certified in their respective fields. Then it's easy to give respect. But when you have an aide and you're calling that aide a teacher, when you know for damn skippy they're not, there's a problem. Okay? So, this is what it is. In implementing the requirements may not limit extended, that's what I just said, limit school year services, limit ESY services to particular categories of disability, like kids with ADHD. Okay? Or unilaterally limit the type, amount, or duration of those services. What did I just say? See what I'm talking about? This is where I get this stuff from, people. Right here. See, it says, ESY services, the term extended school means special education and related services that, see where it says here? And related services that are provided to a child with a disability beyond the normal school year of the public agency in accordance with the child's IEP. Okay? At no cost to the parent and meets the standards of the SEA. You know what's not in here? Anything about the district. About how they can just make it for 2 weeks. About how they only give half-day services. About how they don't give related services to these kids. That's all bull crap, and that's a violation. That's a denial of FAPE. Understand? Do you guys understand the words coming out of my mouth? Okay? This is why this is important. And I'm gonna do another one just to recap, just to continue this. Like, here's one right here: least restrictive environment. These are categorized in a certain way. Okay, so let's just look at it again. Okay, so up here they have FAPE requirements. Okay, so then they talk about free and appropriate public education as it relates to the state and how they're supposed to do their job. Then down here they say other FAPE requirements. So they talk about the FAPE. Okay, what's this? 103. I don't know. Some of these I forget. Okay, so what this is like they have to have an in-kind amount for the grant. See, in order to get the IDEA money, you have to fill out a grant, and the most grants have what's called, we're going to give you this amount of money, but you have to raise this amount of money in-kind funds. So you have a vested interest in this money and how it's implemented. Okay, so it says each state may use whatever state, local, or federal and private sources of support that are available in the state to meet the requirements of this part. For example, if it is necessary to place a child with a disability in a residential facility, a state could use joint agreements between the agencies involved for sharing. I'm sorry, I got that all wrong. Maybe I didn't. I just have to go down. Okay, so that's how you can get, that's called like an interagency agreement or a contract between a residential facility and the public school. Or like in Massachusetts, it's called DDS and DMH. But it's actually called an interagency agreement, which is also in here too. Okay, nothing in this part relieves an insurer or similar third party from an otherwise valid obligation to provide or pay for services provided to a child with a disability. It's definitely the interagency agreement. Okay. Any human service agency that has to do with children in your state, like CPS, DSS, Department of Health, Department of Mental Retardation, all of the mass rehab, I think. I'm not sure, maybe not mass rehab, but any agency that has to do with children, they are under contract, so they can't deny FAPE either. A hearing officer, if you have an open case with any of the human service agencies in your state and you're filing for a hearing, you can actually drag in that department into your case. And then the hearing officer can issue orders for that department to do stuff. Like in one of my cases, the hearing officer issued an order to the Department of Mental Retardation to start the flow, to start the process for guardianship of this child that was severely disabled who was turning 18. And the parent was having a hard time. They told the parent that it was going to take 6 years. So I filed for a hearing. And I told the hearing officer that's not true, because I know for a fact I can go do it. And I can get it done the same day with a 90-day temporary thingy, whatever it's called. Okay? So the parent gets gets guardianship 90 days the first day they walk in, and then 90 days later they have to go back. This is in Massachusetts. So the hearing officer told the Department of Mental Retardation, I want this done now. I don't want to hear 6 years later. 6 years from now, are you kidding me? She's 18 now. So anyway, so they can do that. You can bring them in. That's why and this is how, right here. But you have to have an open case first. You can't call them in to force them to give you services through a hearing. You actually have to have a case. Okay? Well, in Massachusetts you did. Okay, and 3, consistent with 300.323, that's about the IEP. One day we're going to talk about an IEP. The state must ensure that there is no delay in implementing the child's IEP, including any case in which the payment source for providing or paying for the special education related to is being determined. Okay, that's for when a kid is in a private placement. So what it means is the kid can't be the victim because the school district didn't pay their bill or the state agency didn't pay the bill, because sometimes what you have is called a cost share agreement between agencies. And so they'll split the bill 50-50. I actually had one where it was split 3 ways. It was DDS, it was the Department of Mental Retardation, it was the Department of Public Health, Mental Health, and it was the school district. So it was a 3-way split. And so, school district were real happy about that. Okay, so because the kid went to a residential, so that's why they can't. A private school or an agency can't say, well, we can't deliver services because the school district didn't pay their bill this month. Yeah, no, none of that's going to happen. The kid still gets the services, period. Nobody wants to hear that nonsense. Okay, otherwise it's a denial of faith. Okay, so this thing here, the regulations are chock full of stuff that's real important to you guys and that you need to know about. But this is my first go-to. Okay, you guys pop off on some questions. As you notice when you're watching my trainings, I'll go in and get the law while we're there. This is where I'm going. Okay, so when you want to talk about FAPE violations, this is where you go. This is a denial of FAPE. If you're filing a complaint and the school district didn't give you ESY, that's a denial of FAPE. So you cite denial of FAPE. They denied my right to ESY. They don't even have an ESY in the school. Okay, that's a violation. Because it goes case by case. Here's a biggie right here. Child finders, always a denial of FAPE. Okay? Always, always, always. It's their job to identify, locate, and evaluate. That's just it. It's the bottom line. They can't get around it. If they screwed up, then they're going to be in trouble. Okay? And this is the child find laws. And not for nothing, you guys, if you go in and you read this stuff, I'm telling you right now, this is written in plain, simple English. When you're reading this, don't make it difficult. Okay? This crap is already difficult. The stuff that's easy, leave it easy. Just read it. Okay? A practical method is developed and implemented to determine which children are currently receiving needed special education and related services. This is what the school is supposed to do. They got to create a method to identify these kids. How are they going to identify, locate, and evaluate these kids? So they have to submit this information to the state. The state has to submit this information to the feds. How is the state doing this? And then the state has to make sure the school districts are doing it. And when they don't do it, then they get in trouble. Okay? It's very simple. If an LEA is local educational agency, guys, that's your school district. Okay? This is what they have to do. So I just wanted to do this quickie so that you guys can see where the regulations are, where I get a lot of my information from. This is my go-to. When I want to, you keep reading these regulations and using them all the time, you become very familiar with them and you will be popping them off the top of your head like I do. It's because the school district, they'll do the same thing year after year after year. They violate the same regulations because they're stupid. They don't know what these regs are. The teachers don't ever bring it up to the teachers. Don't bring it up to the principal. The only person in your school district that's supposed to be in charge of this is the SPED director, the person that's in charge of the special education program in your school. Not the classroom, not the pre-K program, special education, the whole shooting match. Okay? The special ed director is the one that's in charge of special education. So when you're citing stuff like this, don't send it to the teacher. Teacher don't know. Teacher don't know, don't care. And that's okay, the teacher doesn't know. And they deliberately don't teach teachers about all of this stuff. Because then the teachers will know that they're in violation. And now they got a problem. Because they know they just violated the kids' rights. But their boss, the principal and the SPED director and the school superintendent, tell them, you do it this way. I don't care what they say. We don't care. Because here's what the school districts are doing. They're banking on you guys aren't filing anything and you guys aren't going to take it to, you're not going to pull them to the carpet. They're just banking on it. They know you're going to go to team meetings and they're prepared for you to go to these meetings and chew them a new one. They don't care nothing about it. They act like they do, but they'd rather you go there, yell and scream and cry and carry on and do all that nonsense, send nasty letters, talk to them all out the side of your face. They'd rather you do that than file complaints and go to due process, okay? They'd rather do that. Now, part of this whole thing right here also includes due process and the whole thing about, here it is right here, state complaints, okay? There's the state complaints. Here are the procedures, all right? It's all there in a nutshell. This is what those investigators are supposed to be doing, okay? So when you want to find out, that's where you go right there, okay? When you want to find out what their job function is, and 9 times, like in Pennsylvania, I just did one, and they actually have the law in it. I got to reread it. It may not have all of it, but it has pretty much. Okay? And then it says methods of ensuring services. This is very important because it talks about how, and because I'm going to get it messed up. Identification of or method of defining the financial responsibility of each agency for providing services. Okay, this is this gets deep. Okay, this is what I was talking about earlier. Okay. See that right there? If a public agency other than an educational agency, okay, a public agency is DDS, the Department of Mental Retardation, the Department of Mental Retardation, the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Public Health, because public health sometimes, like in Massachusetts, they're in charge of early intervention. Any agencies, Department of Youth Services, Department of CPS, all of those agencies, okay, they're all supposed to be involved under the IDEA too. They agreed that as a state that they would implement these regulations. So it says, if a public agency other than an educational agency fails to provide or pay for the special education and related services described in the paragraph B1 of this section, the LEA, okay, the school district, or state agency, the Department of Education, must provide or pay for these services to the child in a timely manner. So, when the school district, nobody uses that. I know I haven't. I brought it up once, I think. But you can actually hold the state accountable for services. Like if you're, I think I talked about a kid one time that hadn't been in school in 2 years. That is the one case I brought that up at. The kid hadn't been to school in 2 years, and the school district didn't provide any tutoring. But see, if we could have made the state do it. Forgot what happened, but we could have made the state do it. You can make the state do it too. The LEA or state agency is authorized to claim reimbursement for the services from the non-educational public agency that failed to provide or pay for these services. And that agency must reimburse the LEA or state agency in accordance with the terms of the interagency agreement. That's what I told you. What you guys can do is every state is supposed to have an interagency agreement. Massachusetts took a long time, and I still don't think they have one. The one that they had was older than dirt. It was just as old as the IDEA, which dates back a long time. Okay? So, or other mechanism. So you can ask your state for a copy of your interagency agreement, and in that agreement, it'll say what agencies actually signed on board for to agree to ensure the rights of children under the IDEA. Okay? Like I said, there's a lot of juicy stuff in here that's really, really interesting. Once you get into the 300s, so 300.300, that's the parent consent, and then there's the initial evaluation process, and then it talks about the evaluations, the reevaluations, the determination of eligibility. All of that's in here, and then you start to go down and you talk about the IEP. So after you do the determination of eligibility, then you go into the definition of an IEP. What is an IEP? It talks about the IEP team, parent participation. See, all of this information is in here. Then when you get into the 500s, you're talking about the you're starting to talk about the hearing. Okay, due process, there's a bunch of stuff up here. Mediation is in here. Procedural safeguards is under the procedural safeguards, which includes due process. It talks about the hearing rights. All of this information is very important. But for now, okay, we're just going to leave it up here for you guys in the 100s from the top all the way down, because this is where you guys should get familiar with right here. What do these things mean? And then you'll be able to use them when you're sending over emails. So like, okay, here's one of my favorites that I use all the time is this one. Okay, so special education. What is that? What is the definition of special education? So here's the definition. This came up today. I was looking at something, and this came up, and it's 300.39. I think it's one of my posts, my videos today. Instruction conducted in the classroom, in the home, in hospitals, and in institutions and in other settings, and instruction in physical education. That's the definition. Okay, it says special education means specifically designed instruction at no cost to the parent to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability, including instruction conducted in the classroom, in the home, in hospitals and institutions, and in other settings. Now, the reason why this is important is because if you have a child that is homebound, or you have a doctor's thing that says your child can't go to school, and it's indefinite, and it's due to a chronic illness, okay? Or it's because it's not safe for your kid to go to school because of some other issues that are going on at school, okay? Could be a lot of reasons. So if your kid's if your kid is at home, that doesn't mean that your kid doesn't get any services. That means the school district has to send over tutoring, because the longer they go without providing your kid with tutoring, that means they change your kid's placement. If they change your kid's placement, now they're going to really have some problems, okay? Because if your kid's original placement was at school and they didn't give your kid any services when your kid was pulled out of school indefinitely or for 3 months. Let's say your kid was pulled out for 3 months. So your kid was pulled out of school for 3 months. School district knew that your kid was pulled out, had medically excused absence. The school never suspended your kid. The school never did any disciplinary actions on your kid. And the reason why they didn't is because you gave them a doctor's letter saying your kid would be out of school for 3 months. That proves your point. So the district didn't provide your kid with any education in the home. That's a denial of faith. Because special education can be provided in the home. It can be provided. I've had school people go to hospitals for my kids. I've had them go to institutions like programs that were for kids who were on psych wards. Okay, they had been put in a psych hospital. I've had teachers go there and give the kids education, give them their education at school, tutoring. Yes. So that's why this is important for you guys. You really need to check this stuff out. I'm going to put the link to this site in the description box below. Excuse me. And what I really need you guys to do is subscribe to my channel and to like it and to get notification. I'm going to put these out as often as possible, and as soon as I do my next live, I will let everybody know. I'm trying this out. I'm testing out a new system, and I'm liking it a lot, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback. So I really like this, and it's a lot of fun, and I can concentrate more, and I can zoom in on certain things that you guys need. I love doing the lives, but sometimes it gets out of control and it's way too long. And it's too long for anybody to get that much out of it. Maybe some of your questions are being answered, but at the same time, there are others that aren't getting what they need. So I wanted to make sure everybody gets what they need. I am going to do the lives, but for right now, we're going to leave it here. And I will let you guys know as soon as I do my next live. Okay? Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I'll be doing another one on this part 2. And we're just going to go delve deeper into like the state complaint, and we're going to the major regulations. But anyway, so I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, and love ya. Bye-bye.